There are moments in human history when the horizon appears bruised with ash, when the sky itself seems to echo the groans of the earth below. War has a way of turning cities into tombs and homes into whispers of what once was. It is in these grim hours when smoke rises like a dark prayer and silence follows the scream of bombs that humanity looks upward or inward and asks the ancient question anew: where is God? The question is not merely rhetorical, nor is it the cry of a heart void of faith. It is the aching search of the soul for light when the stars themselves seem to have vanished. Light amid the smoke is not simply a meditation on theology. It is an invitation to walk through fire in search of the eternal. It is not a study of doctrines, nor a catalog of divine justifications. It is something more intimate, more existential. It is the breath drawn between gunfire, the silence in a trench, the child clutching her doll beneath rubble, the soldier whispering a final prayer before the dawn. It is the trembling, persistent hope that even now divinity has not turned its face away. To ask where God is in war is to peel back the veil of all we think we understand about good, evil, power, and presence. For some, the battlefield is proof of God's absence. For others, it becomes the crucible where faith is forged. But beyond the philosophical battlegrounds of theology and the cold rationale of geopolitics, something more mysterious hovers like a ghost, like a dove, like a voice not heard but known. God in times of war may not thunder from the sky or intervene with celestial armies. Perhaps the mystery is deeper, that God is not above war, but within it, moving quietly amid the ruins beneath the horror, alongside the wounded. There is something ancient and cosmic in this struggle. It is not just nations clashing, but principalities and powers, forces seen and unseen, pressing into the fabric of reality. The smoke we see may be literal, but it also masks a deeper battle, a spiritual unraveling or realignment. And in this sacred chaos, the light we seek may not blind or dazzle, but flicker gently like a candle that refuses to be extinguished. It may live in acts of radical mercy, in the strange calm of a mother sheltering her children, or the forgiveness spoken between enemies on the brink of death. To understand the presence of God in war, we must be willing to step outside the binaries of justice and injustice, victim and aggressor, right and wrong. Not to erase them, but to see beyond them into the heart of what it means to be human, divine and broken, all at once. This is not the God of easy answers. This is not the God who rubber stamps war or waves a finger of wrath. This is the God who once hung on a cross between empire and rebellion, surrounded by soldiers, mocked by the crowd, and pierced by both spear and silence. This is the God who knows suffering not as an idea, but as a wound. As war spreads across continents and screens, as headlines echo with sorrow, and hearts grow numb from the repetition of grief, this exploration dares to hold the flame of hope close to the fog of despair. It does not deny the blood, the cruelty, or the shattered lives. It does not ask us to explain them away. Instead, it asks a deeper question. What if God is not where we expect him to be? What if he is not in the victory or the vengeance, but in the breaking? What if the light is not behind the smoke, but within it? In the pages that follow, we will walk this mystery together. We will enter the ruins, not to glamorize suffering, but to seek the divine heartbeat beneath it. We will trace the echoes of scripture, myth, history, and conscience, listening for the whisper of eternity in a world that seems to scream. And above all, we will hold space for the sacred possibility that even in the chaos of war, God is not absent. He is hidden, yes, mysterious perhaps, but not gone. And for those with eyes to see and hearts that still ache for peace, he is closer than the smoke would have us believe. To ask where God is in times of war is not just to question divine geography. It is to probe the architecture of reality itself. At its core, this question carries layers upon layers of unseen weight. The longing for justice, the hunger for peace, the ache of disillusionment, the tremble of hope that something greater than chaos is still at work. If war is the great disruptor, then perhaps the presence of God is the deeper thread that refuses to unravel. One of the first themes that emerges is the paradox of divine presence and hiddenness. The scriptures are replete with moments where God seems absent, silent through the cries of Job, seemingly distant when Jerusalem burns, hidden as Jesus weeps in Gethsemane. And yet again and again we are told that God is near to the brokenhearted, a refuge in times of trouble, and with us always, even to the end of the age. The coexistence of war's horror and God's nearness is not a contradiction in this spiritual landscape, but a tension to be lived within. Perhaps it is in that very tension that faith becomes not a shield against suffering, but a lantern carried through the valley of death. Another vital current flows through the theme of moral complexity. War tempts us toward easy binaries, good versus evil, us versus them, righteous wrath versus unprovoked aggression. But the soul resists such simplicity. In every soldier there is a sun. In every victim a face that reflects our own humanity. The Spirit of God, if we dare believe it, does not wear uniforms, nor is he bound by flags or allegiances. He walks quietly into enemy camps and refugee tents alike. He mourns with a widow in both cities. He listens to prayers spoken in many tongues, not aligning himself with power, but always mysteriously with love. In this light, war is more than politics or history. It becomes a stage for deeper forces, a clash between what the ancients called principalities and powers. These are not merely metaphors for corrupt rulers or dark regimes. They are systemic, unseen dynamics, greed, fear, pride, tribalism, that sweep across the world like shadow tides. Where is God in this cosmic current? He is not the author of these forces, but their challenger. He is the one who subverts them, not through superior violence, but through a strange, unsettling compassion that exposes the futility of conquest. This leads us to another shimmering truth. Divine love is not passive. It is not a silent observer in the theater of suffering. It is active, subversive, and often disguised. It shows up in peacemakers who defy orders and medics who risk death to tend the wounded and grandmothers who feed strangers across enemy lines. It is the resistance of the soul against despair. It is the choice to forgive when hatred has been taught for generations. It is divine not because it is loud, but because it is enduring. A related theme is that of incarnation, not in the narrow theological sense alone, but as a broader spiritual truth. In times of war, God incarnates himself again and again, not as a distant judge, but as the wounded, the grieving, the displaced. The Christ who suffered does not merely symbolize divine solidarity with pain, he embodies it. The cross becomes more than a religious artifact. It becomes a lens through which the divine intersects human agony. It says here too, even here. And from this flows yet another truth: transformation is often hidden in catastrophe. War tears down, but it also reveals. It strips away illusion, revealing both the darkness we are capable of and the light we never knew we possessed. God may not cause the war, but in its ashes, he plants seeds. It is in the rubble that prophets are born. It is in exile that identity is forged. It is in the furnace of destruction that souls are often awakened not to hatred, but to a deeper hunger for peace. Lastly, there is the mystery of hope itself. Hope is not optimism. Hope is not the belief that things will get better. Hope in the divine sense is the trust that even in the worst of things, something eternal holds us fast. It is the knowing, not the seeing. It is the refusal to let the fire consume our spirit, even when it has consumed all else. God in times of war may not prevent the night, but he is the whisper that there is still a dawn. To hold these truths is to walk a narrow path. It does not lead to easy answers or triumphant declarations. It leads instead to a deeper awareness, a spiritual clarity that sees God not outside the war, but burning like a silent star within it. It is the awareness that the divine is not what rescues us from suffering, but what transforms suffering into something that can reveal the sacred. To speak of war solely in terms of tactics and politics is to confine a storm to the shape of a single raindrop. There are truths buried deep beneath the headlines, truths that do not speak in reports or declarations, but in the quiet symbols woven through the soul of humanity. In these symbols, these deeper narratives, we catch glimpses of divine movement, subtle, paradoxical, and unyielding. Imagine a vast battlefield where time and eternity seem to overlap. The clamor of weapons crashes like thunder against the silence of the heavens. Amid the smoke, a figure walks unarmed, unflinching, crowned, not with power, but with thorns. This is not a tale of a Messiah descending in fire. It is the story of a God who enters into the wound rather than avoiding it. The smoke is not merely the residue of battle. It is the veil between what is seen and what is true. One ancient narrative speaks of the refiner's fire. In the old texts, fire was never just destructive, it was purifying. Silver and gold are purified not by protection, but by exposure to flame. So too the human soul in war. The anguish of war, though born of human error and ambition, is allowed to become a forge. The divine does not stoke the flame, but enters it. Like the fourth figure in the furnace of Babylon, God appears in the fire not to extinguish it, but to ensure it does not consume what is essential. The soul, like gold, is made luminous through the very thing that tried to destroy it. And then there is the story of the weeping prophet. He stands at the edge of a broken city, ash falling like snow. The temple defiled, the children scattered. He does not call for vengeance. He does not curse heaven. He weeps. His tears are sacred. They are the bridge between justice and mercy. In every era, he appears not always in robes, but in classrooms, in refugee camps, in bombed-out hospitals. The divine voice speaks most clearly, not in thunder, but in tears. Where is God in the weeping prophet who mourns what could have been, who holds in his heart both grief and a stubborn seed of hope? Consider, too, the garden at night. Before the war of swords comes the war of the soul. A man kneels under olive trees, sweat like blood upon his brow. He does not flee, though every cell in him aches to. He whispers, "Not my will." This is not weakness. This is the final resistance to darkness, the refusal to become like the enemy. In every war, this moment repeats the unseen choice between retaliation and redemption. In hidden hearts, the same prayer is whispered by those who would rather die in mercy than live in cruelty. It is here in the unseen trenches of choice that the divine narrative unfolds again. Another symbol emerges from ancient Hebrew tradition, the ark that held the presence of God. It was not stored in palaces or temples at first. It was carried on the shoulders of wandering people through deserts and danger. It was vulnerable, mobile, exposed. It moved with the suffering. Today, that ark still exists, not as a relic, but as a metaphor. The presence of God does not reside in sanctuaries alone, but in every place where pain is carried with dignity. The true sanctuary is where a soul, though torn and tired, still clings to the divine whisper, "You are not alone." And then the paradox of the Lamb. In every human story of power, victory belongs to the lion, the warrior, the conqueror. But in the cosmic story, victory comes through the Lamb's silent, sacrificed, scarred. He does not conquer by force, but by absorbing violence and transmuting it into forgiveness. This is not passive surrender, it is divine alchemy. In times of war, we often search for lions, but perhaps the true power lies in the Lamb, who dares to absorb all hatred and still offer peace. Let us not overlook the hidden harvests. There is a strange narrative that runs through both scripture and history. The barren land, the broken vine, the shattered wall, and then the return. After exile, the remnant rebuilds. After desolation, the fig tree blooms. Not always quickly, not always visibly, but always surely. War may burn the field, but the seeds God has planted in the soul are fireproof. They wait in silence, germinating beneath ashes. This too is where God is in the mystery of seeds that grow even in graves. To ask, "Where is God in war?" is to ask not just for comfort, but for meaning. The symbolic narratives remind us that God is not absent from the devastation, He is hidden within it, moving like breath through ruins, shaping something eternal from what appears broken. It is a divine economy of reversal, strength made perfect in weakness, life born from death, redemption sprouting from ruins. In every generation, poets and prophets have tried to name it. They speak of light that shines in darkness and is never overcome. They speak of peace not as the absence of war, but as a deeper harmony that survives it. They speak of resurrection not just as a future event, but as a current pulse beneath the rubble. These stories are not diversions, they are revelations. And through them, the veil lifts just enough to reveal that even in the smoke, the light is real. There comes a moment when symbols must step down from the clouds and enter the dust of daily life. If the divine presence is not merely poetic or metaphorical, then it must matter where the feet fall, where the hands reach, where the heart chooses, especially in the midst of war's chaos. So the question shifts subtly from where is God to how does God move among us? And more haunting still, how do we move with him? In war-torn cities and fractured nations, the air grows thick not only with smoke and dust, but with disillusionment. It becomes easy to believe that goodness is weak, that mercy is foolish, that only the strong, those with louder guns or colder hearts, survive. But if God still walks among the rubble, then the strength of heaven is not what the world has measured. It is not louder, it is deeper. To live the reality of God's presence in times of war is to choose a path that may seem invisible, even absurd. It is to be the one who still tends a garden when the bombs fall, who still feeds the stranger when scarcity rules, who still forgives when vengeance seems justified. These are not gestures of denial, they are fierce acts of resistance. To love in the presence of war is to declare that evil cannot fully rewrite the human story. Where there is love, there is God disguised not in thunder, but in the trembling of hands that still dare to care. Many ask, what can I do, as if only the large and loud actions matter? But divine work often unfolds in the unseen. It begins in the interior war, the war within the soul, to not become like what it hates. Every time someone chooses to remain human while surrounded by inhumanity, a line is drawn in the unseen realm. Every time a soldier defends without dehumanizing, every time a citizen shelters rather than scorns, every time an artist still creates a mother, still prays a child, still dreams, that is where the kingdom of God invades the broken systems of man. These acts are not merely ethical, they are mystical, because they participate in a reality deeper than the one headlines show. Just as Christ bore his cross, not for personal virtue, but to enact cosmic reconciliation, so too the daily courage of ordinary people becomes sacramental. The world sees rubble, but heaven sees altars being raised in refugee camps, in field hospitals, and whispered prayers at checkpoints. Every act of mercy is a defiance of hell. In places of leadership, political, spiritual, social, this integration calls for a different kind of voice. Not one that merely echoes fear or inflames division, but one that can hold truth and love in the same breath. The prophet's task has never been to comfort the comfortable, but to call all sides to repentance. Where are the leaders who will weep before they speak? Where are the decision makers who still believe in conscience over conquest? This sacred practicality is also found in how we speak to one another. Words become weapons or healing balms. In times of war, narratives become tools of propaganda or resistance. To speak truthfully, to preserve the dignity even of one's enemy, is a spiritual act. When language no longer dehumanizes hearts, begin to remember their original shape. This too is where God dwells in the space between words spoken with compassion. On a personal level, those who witness war, whether directly or through screens, must choose not to be paralyzed by helplessness. Compassion is not passive. It moves the hands to build the feet to go the resources to flow. If you cannot stop the war, you can help the wounded. If you cannot reach the battlefield, you can reach your neighbor. War shrinks the world, but love expands it again. To integrate the divine into the real is not about pretending all is well. It is about refusing to surrender to despair. Even grief can be sacred if it refuses to close its eyes. Even lament can be a prayer. Even fear, when laid bare before God, becomes a doorway to deeper trust. We were not meant to make sense of suffering with our minds alone. We were meant to incarnate a different response, to become the hands and feet of the God who still walks with the wounded. In every war, there are those who carry light in small, consistent ways. The doctor who stays behind when others flee. The journalist who tells the truth not for fame, but for justice. The old man who hides children in his cellar. These people are not saints in stained glass, they are mirrors of the divine in motion. They do not end the war, but they prevent it from winning the soul of the world. To say that God is present in war is not to sanctify the violence. It is to testify that violence does not get the final word. The deeper truth is that even in the darkest hours, God plants seeds that bloom in seasons yet to come. These seeds are hidden in mercy, sown through hands that choose healing, watered by tears that refuse to dry in bitterness. As the dust of history settles always too late, always after great loss, we return to the silence. It is there in that stillness that the echo of divine presence becomes most audible. What seemed like absence begins to resemble a hidden nearness. The burning question, where is God in times of war, morphs into a deeper one, where have we looked for him? And perhaps more haunting still, where has he been calling us to be? Throughout this exploration, we have wandered through smoke and spirit, through grief and transcendence, touching the edges of mystery that words can only gesture toward. And now we find ourselves standing not at an answer, but at an invitation. War in all its horror strips the illusions from us. It shows us what we are when all is torn away. It demands that we choose not only sides in conflict, but sides in a cosmic alignment. Not between flags, but between light and shadow. This is not the simplistic choice of good versus evil as drawn by propaganda or tribal instinct. It is deeper, more harrowing. It asks, will we become cruel in the name of survival? Will we make fear our God, or let love risk everything again? Will we let war harden us into monsters of grief, or will we allow it to awaken the latent holiness that still flickers waiting in the soul of mankind? In the Christian story, God does not wage war from a distance. He does not throw lightning from the heavens. He descends, he bleeds, he forgives, even as he is murdered. The cross is not merely a symbol of redemption. It is the divine protest against the logic of violence. It is heaven's refusal to play by hell's rules. This is what it means for God to be present in war not as the architect of suffering, but as its great absorber, transformer, redeemer. He is in the trench, not the throne. He is in the scream, not the strategy. If this is true, then every soul is called into that same mystery, not to become passive, but to embody a different kind of power. Not the domination of empires, but the quiet revolution of sacrificial love. We were not created to kill each other for land, for creed, for fear. We were created to be temples of the living God, walking flames of divine presence in a world addicted to shadows. And now we are called again. Perhaps your calling is to intercede not with bullets, but with prayer that bleeds compassion across borders. Perhaps it is to rebuild not with vengeance, but with hands that refuse to stop tending to the broken. Or perhaps your call is simply to stay awake, to not turn your eyes away from suffering, to be a witness. Even that is a holy act. For the eyes that choose to see become the windows through which God himself still peers into this world. You may feel small, but every soul aligned with divine light is a cosmic instrument. Heaven bends toward earth through those who yield themselves to love. There is no act too small to become part of this holy insurgency against despair. Each tear you honor, each child you protect, each piece you sow, it enters the eternal story. And it thunders louder than the drums of war. So this is the transformational call, not to wait for peace as an event, but to incarnate peace as a presence. Not to search for God in safety, but to follow him into the wounds. He is already there, waiting. In the refugee's eyes, in the soldier's conscience, in the mother's ache, in the stranger's helping hand. You are not powerless. You are not forgotten. You are not separate from the sacred equation. The same divine breath that hovered over the waters at creation still pulses in you. Let it rise. Let it interrupt hatred. Let it carve through injustice. Let it turn your life into a psalm amid the ruins. For in every age the world is reborn not through power, but through love that refuses to die. And in the smoke of war the light still shines not from above, but from within.